2-3 years later that I was called back because the numbers had gone down. They had an accumulated loss of 285 crores. Called me to fix the plumbing.
It's a lot of plumbing. You never had to job hunt, is it?
Not really.
What are those golden rules?
The basic rules are the same, but you have to adapt them to every business.
You were happy being at the same company in a similar role because you saw the long term, or you didn't think about it as much?
So even your short-term decisions have to be aligned with the longer-term plan.
We live in a culture of interns and probations and 2-year hop, skip and jump exercises. So maybe that's how our corporate world is changing.
In some, we used to call it the mentor system, and the sales guys used to call it the tormentor system. One of the state governments was struggling with pensions.
Mm-hmm.
People were out on the street because they didn't get their pension on time. And old people. Solved the problem, and it saved the government at least 1,000 crores.
Hello and welcome to the NJ show. We waited for this shoot setup for a while now, but I'm super excited for this one, especially because this is personal, less professional for me.
Yes.
So,
Likewise.
Anil Nair with me. I have actually written down how to introduce you because it's very challenging to go through your LinkedIn. But MD Country Digitization for Cisco, APJC, Senior Fellow at the Portulans Institute, Board Advisor at Netcon, Founder at Think Street, and I also believe you have the honor of being the father to Nikhil Nair. So I think that's a feather in your cap that you're very proud of. But very
own production.
own production. So very excited for this conversation, and welcome to the NJ show.
Thank you.
I want to start with childhood, which doesn't seem like long back, given your habit of still learning. But tell me a bit about where you grew up. What was it like? How it shaped you? What were you thinking as a kid? What was Anil Nair, the 7-8-year-old, 10-year-old thinking?
So, my dad was with Nestle.
Uh-huh.
So, he used to be at different places, meaning in the sense it was transferable job.
Mm-hmm.
So, we were in Delhi, we were in Mumbai, we were in Bangalore. Finally, he settled down in Bangalore. So, a lot of change of schools, many friends, and wide exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look back and I look at what I wanted to be, it was always to be like my dad, because he was a very commanding, he had a very commanding presence. He was tall, and he was the first Indian to head sales for Nestle.
Wow.
And the joke was that when he used to speak on the phone, the guy on the other side would stand up.
He was there, Janaganamana. I love it.
So that's what I wanted to be,
Wow.
all along.
So that sort of respect
Yeah.
is what you wanted to invoke.
Correct.
And did he shape that for you, or it was just observation?
I think he did give me a lot of space. So school was, of course, there were a lot of rules and stuff like that. But after that, college and career, he left me to shape it myself.
So were you the kind of disciplined kid from the start, the first bencher who's always writing neatly and getting all the right scores, or?
Somewhere in between,
Yeah.
But I would like to stay out of the limelight.
Oh,
That is the
wow.
more important thing.
So that was from the early days itself. Like you
Yes.
don't want the limelight, but you want to put in the hard work and
Right.
stay below the radar.
Stay below the radar was very important.
Wow. Why very important?
It's just, I guess, the way your personality is.
Even your father?
Yeah. No, my dad was just the opposite. He
Uh-huh.
was very outgoing and, the typical extrovert, as you would call it.
Did friendships play a role in the early days in shaping you or how you think, or were you more like friends have a certain place in life but they don't influence you professionally?
I guess it's a mix of both. In the sense, it was easy for me to make friends. Being at so many schools,
Mhm.
new school every 3 years or 4 years. I guess I picked up the ability to be able to make friends easily. But I guess the influence was limited. I was who I was, and I guess the change was gradual. but it was there. But I was also very conscious of the fact that I was introverted, and that could be, For instance, when I joined college, you
Uh-huh.
see, after Bangalore Military School, I joined college, and it was like liberation. And in military school, there were all sorts of military rules. Yeah, it was run by the military. We had a lieutenant colonel as the principal. The administrative officer was a captain. So when I went to college,
Yeah.
the first thing I saw was the union reps. They seemed to be very important in the setup.
Uh-huh.
Determining everything that got done in college.
Yeah.
So I was very determined that I should become a student union rep.
Despite being an introvert and wanting to stay below the radar, isn't that a conflict of interest?
Yeah, suddenly there was a change because I saw that those guys had such a following.
Oh,
So I
wow.
said I must be like them, and I slowly learned how to speak in public and how to climb on a wall and give a speech to students, to fellow students.
So
Like for instance, at college,
uh,
so I stood for elections.
oh, but military school you didn't.
No, military school.
It
there
was
were
just
no
an idea.
elections.
Okay.
So I got into the student union. I stood for elections. I won, and the first day after getting elected, a guy, one of the students, he threw a stone on a bus, and those guys grabbed him and took him to the bus station. And my first job was to get him out of that place without knowing the local language.
Did you manage to, or is he still in?
So I, of course, sought help, and we went there and we negotiated with the drivers and the conductors, and they let him go.
I love it. I love it. But how did you win? An introvert suddenly going to college, standing for elections?
So actually, what I did was, when the guys were going around giving their speeches, I started asking them difficult questions. Suddenly, everybody knew that there was some little fellow somewhere who was asking all these difficult questions.
Just having a contrarian viewpoint.
So the next year, they voted hoping that I'd do something different.
Or at least they did not have to answer anything anymore.
Yeah. Relief.
This was your undergrad, is it?
Yes.
So you studied in which city?
Bangalore.
Bangalore.
St. Joseph's, Bangalore.
And then did you directly jump to your work life after that?
Yes. So throughout my college life, I didn't see much of class.
Yeah.
Because I was involved in all these union activities. And then I got into the first job that I got while I was in college. I didn't know what I was going to do after.
Yeah.
But I got into the first job immediately after, maybe a month after I finished college.
How did you pick that first job? I think a lot of us, go through a dilemma at that time because there are so many options. Maybe at the time they weren't, but how do you process that decision?
It's not as if I had that many options.
Okay.
So I took the first thing that came my way, little realizing that it sort of determines the sector that you will work in, not necessarily, but very often, that you will work in for the rest of your working life.
Wow. At least that was the norm at the time.
No, that's when I look back now, that's what I feel.
Oh, okay.
Like, that choice, like if I had got into, let's say, FMCG, probably I would have continued on that path. But I got into B2B selling and I stuck to that for many, many years.
So sales doesn't seem like the first instinct for you hearing your story. So was that just lack of other opportunities and you said, I'll take it up? Or did you actually want to get into sales? Because
no, I didn't particularly want to get into sales. Like I said, if some other opportunity had come, I may have taken that.
I met Sanjeev Mehta, the ex-head of HUL, and he brought up in some seminar the importance of being in sales early on in your career and being close to the customer, building some confidence, some on-ground knowledge, and getting out of your comfort zone, handling pressure. Like so many things that come out of sales. So how did that play a role in shaping you as a leader, as an individual contributor in corporate? You touched upon it a bit, but can you elaborate?
So when you talk about customer, the first thing that you shouldn't do So there are different definitions of customer.
Uh-huh.
And one guy told me, "Aapko pata hai what's the definition of customer?" So I said no. So he said, "Jo kasht se mare, उसे customer कहते हैं." So it should never be like that.
This is very standard. But I'm guessing you already thought of it as something to do with pain because you didn't want to pursue it initially, right?
Well, I sort of grew into it, I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
And then I found it was quite fascinating because, the customer would probably determine whether he gave you the order or not.
Yeah,
So he was the big guy in the interaction.
yeah,
And being able to convince him in a shorter period of time meant that you had to summon the right facts at the right time and understand the situation and present it appropriately. And again, there was always the competitive element. There would be people who are waiting at the door, the next
Yeah.
guy in, who probably, if he made a better pitch, would get the deal. So your ability to convince people on the other side of the table, at least for me, that got sharpened.
I think that's important, and also especially for people like us or in our generation or the generations after us. The challenge is that we work in isolation from day one. We get out of college, we sit on our laptops, get into a job, and so that people interaction, that sense of competition, the need to adapt in a conversation is very low because either we're working from home or we have our own projects to manage, etc. So sales becomes quintessential, even keeping the future in mind. Things that can be done in isolation can be replaced, and we'll have a conversation about technology and how it will change our professional lives. But I think sales plays an important role in understanding people better and developing the knack of adapting in a conversation. Like maybe you'll say X to another customer, but Y to somebody else. So for the same product, the same pitch. And I think
That's a very important part of it.
yeah,
See, because every customer is different. There might be similar customers in a particular vertical, but the context could be different. And you're being able to contextualize it for them makes all the difference. And you can't leave it to them to join the dots. You have to join the dots for them.
but out of curiosity, I'll do a quick digress. You don't come across as someone who is very salesy. In the sense, I mean it uh, from the perspective that salespeople usually have to come up with the truth on the spot and manufacture facts. So, how did you balance the objective with your morality and getting things done versus doing it the right way?
See, these days customers are very smart.
Yeah.
Okay. And therefore, the best way out is to be as authentic as possible,
Mhm.
because otherwise he'll catch you out. And ultimately, it's a relationship of trust, because it's not that you want to do one deal and run away. You want to create a customer who respects you and will continue to give you business,
Yeah. Retention.
because it's that much less effort going forward. Because once the trust is established, the business will come.
And then, so now you start working in a sales role. Maybe you work in that capacity for the coming years. Where does your MBA come into picture? And then we can move on to your career journey, because this is a very important juncture in uh, our careers today, where we think, okay, do we get on ground experience and is that more relevant? And do I specialize in one thing, or should I be a generalist, pursue an MBA? What was the value or the role it played back then? How did you think about the decision? How did it impact your career?
So I started working,
Yeah.
just after I finished college.
Mhm.
And then over the years, I felt disadvantaged that I didn't have an MBA.
Why so?
It's all in the mind, right?
Yeah.
So we create all these barriers in our own minds, which come in the way of how we perform and how we can deliver on results. And after doing my MBA, which I did while I was working, it was a unique format, I realized that it's a very important thing. It's a good thing for people to do, because you sort of compress your learning cycle. It definitely gives you perspective to what you're doing, and you learn the rules of the game.
Because you were with people who have worked or Like,
Yeah,
was it the cohort or the curriculum?
it's both. The
Okay.
curriculum is also important, where you see different facets of business that you're not all exposed to. Others, if you're in sales, you get exposed to a certain silo, and all your life you're optimizing that silo. I think this gives you a wider perspective, and of course, peer learning from peers, especially when I did my advanced MBA, advanced management program.
Mhm.
The learning was more from peers.
That was at XIM, right?
The MBA was from Exam,
Okay.
and the advanced management program was ISB in India and Kellogg in the US.
So, at what phase of your life did you do these two?
Well, mid career, I think it was 96 to 99 when I did my MBA.
So, you were what, 27, 28 then?
Older,
Oh, so you took your time.
yes.
You wanted to gain some practical knowledge, bring that perspective to your MBA.
Yeah, because otherwise, I think it's important that you have that perspective of what work really is like. And then your learning is much more sharper when you go and do your MBA. And it's true for the faculty as well. Otherwise, it can be a case of the blind leading the blind. So if the faculty has had that appropriate exposure
In the
and
real
they
world.
can relate it to what goes on in the real world, it makes such a difference to the learning that you go out with.
What's your take on, or what is your advice to the youngster that's thinking about the MBA? A, whether they should pursue it or not, and then if they should it be a full-time dedicated thing so that you squeeze all the juice out of it, or should it be like this switching gears exercise where you can implement some of those learnings?
So first of all, I think an MBA is good to do,
Mhm.
but whether you do it, in one format or the other, I would prefer the second, because then the learning is not so concentrated. So it's learning as well as the practical side of it, and you can actually check the relevance of that learning as you go along.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's more practical, I feel. But I don't know how many schools offer that sort of structure. I wish they would. I wish there would be many more, because the fact that you don't have that alternative, or it's not that you see that often restricts
Yeah.
it to the first format. And the worst format is the part-time MBA,
Yeah,
where you're working and then you go and attend classes in the evening or over the weekend.
yeah.
Because actually you're so caught up in the work that you do that the studying becomes a compromise.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work. It's half-baked knowledge that you'll come out with at best.
So you came out of your MBA.
Yeah.
What did your journey thereafter look like? And maybe we take a bird's eye view for now, and you tell us how you made the important decisions that shaped your career, what you learned from each experience. Because the context for this question is, so I heard Nawal Ravikant once say that we spend a lot of time in the decisions that we take, but not in making the decisions that we have to live. So let's say I want to do an MBA, I spend 2 years, but how much time did I actually spend in thinking whether it's the right fit, which college or whatever? So that the time before you get into that action phase is very crucial. So how did you think of it, and how did it shape up for you?
Well, I think first of all, I came out and there was more acceptance because you had the degree.
Yeah.
And, I figured out that learning from books has a limitation, but at the same time, there are exams that you have to cope with. There are tests and quizzes and stuff like that. So while in the institute itself, I learned that whatever one had to do over one semester, I would write it in my tiniest handwriting on a sheet of paper, 2 sides. And I could revise it 200 times, while others could probably, go through their books, and the times they would go over it would be much less
frequent.
So when I went into an exam also, I was so thorough in the fact that I knew exactly what I knew, and I could, crack the papers. So there was there was this part of it, and then there was of course supplemented with the actual knowledge in the field.
Uh-huh.
But how it helped in the later years was that I knew how to take down notes for the first time. I learned
Minutes of the meeting.
the important points.
Yeah.
How to pick it up and how to keep it there and how to review it.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, I was at a later stage in my career, I was turning around the company. I did that 3-4 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned how, whatever had to be done, I would put it on one sheet of paper. So in this case, it was a 6x6 matrix. Like, for instance, on the financials, you had to do some things. And on the HR side, you had to do a number of things.
Yeah.
So it was 6 aspects of the business, and within each aspect, 6 things to do. So
Got it. So,
but I could look at it every day, so that I would never lose sight of what to do holistically
the direction.
in terms of turning around the company. So I'm saying when I look back, probably those few years that I spent doing my MBA did teach me how to put things on one sheet of paper, how to look at it holistically, and how to manage a larger universe better.
That's such a astute observation, and also it's seemingly naive but so important, because sometimes we write these big. So when I was working at Amazon, we used to write these big white papers and plans and visions, maybe a page full of 1,000-2,000 words, and I felt like, when do I read this again? How much of it am I going to remember? It's so dense. So that's a good takeaway, that
It's a good practice at Amazon, right? Before you started the meetings, you had to spend 8 minutes on
that's a lovely practice.
reading, so everybody in the room is on the same page.
That's a lovely practice. So one aspect of it is something I don't like, which is it's not something you can go back to easily. Every time it's very dense. But on the other hand, it taught me that you can't expect everyone to prepare for the meeting in the same way. So why don't you ask them to do it right in the meeting and dedicate time there, because they're anyway going to take that time elsewhere. And what that did is the discussion was so much more fruitful and productive, because now nobody has missed out on anything.
Right.
And everyone's
Everybody's clued in.
pressured to have context. So, and plus it asked for very crystallized thinking. To put everything on one piece of paper is a challenge. Being succinct is the real challenge. And I got crazy feedback in my early days on, hey, you don't need to write, hi, good morning, hope your day was well, to a VP. Like, just get to the point. Sometimes I thought it was ruthless and impersonal, but it got the job done, and it's getting the job done for them. So, but I see your point in trying to be as succinct as possible to stay on track.
Yeah.
And to keep it accessible at all times without spending too much time on it. So you inculcated this habit for good, and you decided to go back to your previous job. Mm-hmm. How did you make career choices going forward? What were those choices? Where did you work?
So I worked for this company called Bradma, which was into document automation.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, for instance, we used to create systems for production control and preventive maintenance and so on and so forth, subscription control. That was in the early years. But it was a precursor to the computer age, which came immediately after. So it sort of directed me to the IT world subsequently.
Mm.
So I worked there for about 14 years. Then I was at Tata Telecom, which was bought over by Avaya.
How did that come about, the Tata Telecom offer?
Somebody reached out, people I knew, because Bradma also was a Tata company, by the way. So within the group.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Got the opportunity and came over to Tata Telecom. Tata Telecom then was bought over by Avaya, which was part of Lucent before. It was spun off from Lucent. And AT&T before that. So AT&T spun off Lucent, Lucent spun off Avaya, and Avaya was in the enterprise communication business. So they bought over Tata Telecom.
So you joined Avaya?
Yeah, so I stayed in the same place and worked another 14 years in Tata Telecom, Avaya, and then it was sold to the SR Group as AGC Networks.
Got it. So, what capacity did you work in at these companies?
So I started off in Tata Telecom looking after the region.
Mhm.
Then I was looking after the sales. Then it became Avaya. Then Avaya, then I became the president looking after the company. Then I became the managing director of that operation. Then it was sold to the SR Group. And I stayed there for the transition. And then they had their own team looking after the company. So I moved on to a Swedish company called Securitas, which is into security. So it was a completely new world again.
How was this switch made?
Again, people reached out.
You never had to job hunt, is it?
Not really.
So you were
Fortunately.
happy being at the same company in a similar role because you saw the long term, or you didn't think about it as much?
So I think if you're making good progress in the company, you tend to stay there. Provided the opportunities are there and provided the responsibilities getting larger, and I suppose provided the remuneration is also keeping pace.
Mhm.
So when you climb the hierarchy, I guess that's what happens. So I saw that in Bradma, where in the first 2 years I was in field selling, and then I was called to the headquarters, which is Mumbai, and then given all India exposure and all India responsibility. So by the time I was 24 or so, 25 or so, I was heading all India operations in various aspects. Like initially, I started with training.
Mhm.
So I had to train all the salespeople across India. And very often they were either my peers or even senior to me. So convincing them about, the basics of selling, which they probably knew better than me, was a good exercise.
Mhm.
Then, of course, I had all India responsibility for sales of certain product lines. Then I joined a company called Megaware for 3 years, selling computers.
This is after Securitas.
No, this was after Bradma.
Okay.
Then I went back to Bradma and spent 8 years in Bradma, 3 years in Megaware Computers, 6 years again in Bradma. So that was 14 years in Bradma, 2 stints.
Wow.
Then joined Tata Telecom. I was there for Tata Telecom, Avaya, AGC Networks for about, again, 14 years.
Wow.
So same company became another company and different roles.
So I always think of it as being a generalist versus having very specific set of skills in a specific domain or industry. What do you think is the key to success from a career growth perspective?
See, the sense, yeah, you can, stay in one sort of business and think the world is that environment.
Mhm.
So when I went to Securitas, for instance, I learned that, it's a security business. And it was a company which is in the security business, which wanted to introduce much more automation in security. So it was more about bringing technology into the business.
Mhm.
But the business itself was very different. The basic rules are the same, but you have to adapt them to every business. It's not as if you can take the same rules and put it into another industry and it will work exactly the same way.
What are those golden rules?
For instance, you when you think, there has to be a vision, there has to be a longer term goal. So even your short term decisions have to be aligned with the longer term plan. And then, of course, doing good business, making sure that there's no rework. For instance, let's say you pick up a bad order,
Mhm.
okay, and you're not able to fulfill it.
Yeah.
Then everybody in the company gets involved in trying to solve the problem. Imagine the amount of rework that has to be done. Imagine the amount of about work that is done without any remuneration for the company.
True.
So I think making sure that there's no rework, making sure that it's process oriented rather than every time discovering new paths to do the same thing and wasting a lot of time across the board. And of course, finally, it's a people business. Every business is a people business. So
Right.
making sure that you have the right people around you who share the same values and who are not looking at it in terms of a short-term bump, but making sure that there is sustainable and profitable growth that's happening.
But I think that was easier back then, given that there was some sort of loyalty towards your career and the employer. Today, it's a little more challenging to align everyone to that broader mission, that long term view, because we live in a culture of interns and probations and 2 year hop, skip, and jump exercises. So maybe that's how our corporate world is. So you went to Securitas, and then what next? Walk me through the next few roles that you played, and then we can deep dive into some of it.
So when I left AGC Networks, it was a very, which was a via Global Connect, was sold to and became AGC Networks. Then a couple of years later, I think it was 2-3 years later, that I was called back because the numbers had gone down. They had an accumulated loss of 285 crores or so. But so they called me to fix the plumbing.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's a lot of plumbing.
So it was an interesting exercise because I was given a free hand, and within a short period of time, we were able to turn around that operation.
Too many questions about this turnaround, but give us some context and then we can deep dive. So, what does it mean? So, I'll frame my question better. We hear a lot about turnarounds during the MBA and how, in a few sentences, the entrepreneur has changed the game or the executive has changed the game for the company. But it includes so many things in a few words, like motivating the people, understanding the root cause of the problem, optimizing costs, and increasing top line, and ensuring you cut off redundancies, or trying new things, experimenting, but at the same time, there is a lot less risk appetite during a turnaround. So, all of that, to actually face it, to do it, how do you root cause, how do you solve that problem, how do you think about it, and then what happened at the end?
So the first thing is, of course, don't sign up for something that you can't do. At the same time, there is certainly an element of risk because you're not 100% certain about the outcome. But I think the process is somewhat similar because I did it about 3-4 times. First is the listening phase, where you have to absorb what's actually going on in the company and understand the context, which is the markets that they operate in, and what sort of competition exists, and what are the paths that you can take. And then comes the phase where you have to formulate a clear plan in terms of how you're going to get to the destination, and it includes all of what you said. For instance, streamlining the force. You may have certain skills which are redundant. You may need a set of new skills. You need people who share the same vision in terms of taking the company to a better place. And then you need to make sure what is it that you're going to keep. For instance, we outsourced our whole of IT, and got out of the space where we shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
And looked at the financials, looked at, for instance, the DSO, the payables, and how to streamline that. Because that's also a reflection of your value chain and how it's working for the customer.
Right.
If he's paying you in time, it means you're doing the right thing. If he isn't, there could be various reasons, but you need to be able to sort it out, starting with your own value chain. So look at the whole value chain. Don't look at it in a siloed way, because, that's the difference. When you're heading a line of business.
Vertical, yeah.
Like, for instance, all my life, till I was vice president sales, I was optimizing a silo.
Got it. So you didn't take a very holistic view till then.
The moment you become a CEO, you realize that it's not about silos, it's about the whole value chain, because that's what the customer perceives. And if you don't optimize that, you're not going to get anywhere.
It's the fruit of all this varied work that the customer sees.
So, like, for instance, you could have a very high sales number, and if the supply chain isn't in sync, the customer is going to be dissatisfied.
Pissed.
So what's the point of a great sales team which is creating growth
Not
which isn't
supported
backed
by.
by the supply, an adequate, efficient
So how do you
supply
root
chain.
cause in this situation? Because again, I'll chime in here. So I obviously run a very small setup, and as soon as I moved back from corporate to join my family business in a turnaround phase, I was lost for the first few months trying to understand what is that pivotal decision that I can start with, because there is so much to change, there is so much to fix, and you don't know how to prioritize, and you also don't know what will move the needle enough to give some early motivation to the group, because not everything can be a 1 year plan. Some things have to start moving immediately so that the team comes together. And so that ruthless prioritization, and then obviously bringing everyone on the same page, because you are new to the organization and so am I in this case. So walk me through that process of understanding what will move the needle and how will people respect you for these drastic changes that you're going to make as an outsider.
By the way, when I was at AGC Networks, we had made a 285 crore loss before I joined.
Yeah.
And we turned it around to EBITDA positive in 1 quarter. But when I look back, I don't think that's a great thing to do. You've got to take your time over it, because otherwise all the parts of the company have to work at the same speed and
Adapt.
sustainably. So I think you need to take your time over it. But to answer your question, that's when I put in that 6x6. I looked at 6 aspects of the business,
Yeah.
being growth and the financials and the people and so on and so forth. And within each there were 6 aspects to look at. And I went diligently doing that. So we were able to achieve the results, and we were able to achieve the growth. The other thing that I learned was, there's no plan that's absolutely cast in stone. It has to be dynamic.
True.
And a dynamic plan always scores over a static plan, because in a dynamic plan you're looking at what are the forces in play which keep changing, and you're navigating appropriately.
But the whole organization has to navigate with you, and that's not easy, because they'll feel like you're asking them to go right once and then the next day it's left and then straight.
In a way, a crisis helps, right? Everybody wants to get out of that crisis.
Yeah.
So there is a certain degree of alignment anyway.
Got it.
And I think people always respond to sound logic and sound reasoning. It has to resonate with them. And that's the effort that you have to put in to create plans which appeal to the lowest common denominator.
Got it. So what did you
And
analyze?
you have to publicize it so that everybody, including the security guard, knows exactly what the plan of the business is. At least the broader plan and the broader direction. And everybody's in sync.
Got it. So what did you identify here, just for our viewers to understand what the context was, and then how did 1 quarter help you all turn it all around?
So, of course, since I was in that company before, I knew the people and I knew the business as well.
Mm.
But the big change that happened was that Avaya was an OEM company, and AGC Networks was a system integrator. After it got sold, it was not selling only Avaya solutions, and Avaya wasn't using a single route to the market. There were
So can
multiple
you
routes to the
explain
market.
this? I don't understand the product as well. So what was Avaya into?
Avaya is into enterprise communication solutions.
Got it. What
And
would
still are.
give me an example of an enterprise?
The solutions essentially what you would need in an enterprise to be effectively being in touch with your customers and your
Got
people.
it. And then AGC?
Similar, except that Avaya used to produce all those solutions. And when they sold the company, then AGC Networks became a channel partner of Avaya, also supporting other brands. So it was like a system integrator.
Got it. So if you needed a solution from AGC, it could use Avaya as a part of the solution, but also other brands and other products.
Right.
Could be some sort of an aggregator of companies like Avaya.
Correct. So now when you look at a solution integrator, a system integrator, The biggest problem is that you have OEMs on one side, you have the customer. There's complete transparency between the OEM and the customer about the deal and the margins and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
So your flexibility in terms of price
Pricing power, essentially.
gets limited.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be able to understand how to figure a solution that involves multiple OEMs as appropriate to create the best solution for the customer. And how can you make the solution resonate with the customer so that he's actually getting the benefit of the best solutions, best integrated solution involving multiple brands.
So this is very interesting to me because now you have to prove to the customer that you are adding value firstly,
Yeah.
because they have full transparency to what you are selling to them and who you are selling it from. And I am guessing one of the reasons for the downfall must have been this transparency.
Yeah, in a sense that system integrators have to deal with this because there's the other aspect, which is that you have to pay the OEM come what may,
Yeah.
whether you sell the goods or not. And when the system integrator is dealing with multiple brands and integrating them for the customer, it may take longer periods of time. For instance, a small part not being available can jeopardize the whole solution working for the customer.
So what was the one sentence summary of why they were not doing well?
I guess being able to figure solutions that can work for the customer and being able to execute on them as planned. If there's a gap between your
What
plan
you think
and the reality, and then of course there will be various dichotomies. There will be
true
lack of satisfaction in various people.
So you spotted this dichotomy, and then how do you pick what will start turning things around?
So the first thing is make sure that the proposition that you're offering to the customer is actually executable.
Got it. Don't overcome it and underdeliver.
Yes, exactly. Which is what happens in selling, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so you turn the equation, and so you underpromise and overdeliver.
Yeah.
And then, of course, have more and more customers who subscribe and who see the value that you bring to the table in terms of being able to execute fast, in terms of being able to offer a proposition which others can't, making it more holistic, combining it with the services so it's actually working for them on the ground.
Yeah.
It's innovative and helps them get ahead in terms of their business strategy as well. Aligning and understanding their business strategy to be able to offer solutions that are appropriate.
That's very interesting, especially because this is not a time where your OEMs are being very patient or anything, or your customers are waiting for you to solve things. So you do have to move fast before you start eroding trust and goodwill.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about execution and problem solving in general. So when you look back at such instances, what role does planning play, and when do you start executing, and or how do they go hand in hand throughout? Because you said there is some dynamism that's required. So walk me through the importance of planning and executing.
So first of all, you're going to identify which are the verticals, which are the industry verticals that you're going to serve.
Yeah.
Because within an industry vertical, you'll find that solutions are similar. Okay, and then you can standardize a large part of what you want to offer.
True.
And the more the standardization, the better the chances of being able to execute exactly on time, without any glitches.
What do you mean by standardization?
Well, it could be the bill of material, it could be the design, for instance. The bill of quantity could change a bit, but the designs could be similar. Because the needs of different companies in that vertical would be similar, like a bank.
Right.
The requirement of a second bank would be similar. There could be some contextual variations, but the needs are similar. So standardizing to the extent possible and customizing to the extent possible, getting that equation right. A larger portion of it will be standardizing, and a smaller portion of it will be customizing. So for each vertical, looking at it that way makes it possible for you to draw up a better plan, because planning has to be realistic.
Right.
Otherwise, if every time your plan doesn't work, what sort of plan is it? And then getting customer feedback, so that every part of your value chain is being analyzed, not by you, by your customer.
Right.
And the feedback they give you must be actionable also.
Of
That means
course.
I should be able to specifically talk to which part of the value chain isn't working, or which part of the value chain is working very well. Because one part of the value chain working very well and another not doing so well creates more problems than it solves.
Of course. So synthesizing that feedback
Yeah.
to make it
And
actionable.
doing it on a regular basis, making it part of your culture.
I mean, culture is another can of worms that I want to touch upon. But maybe before that, so you went on to turn this company around. I think we can do another podcast on how you started listening, gained trust, understood the problem, created an action plan, executed on it, and turned the company around in 1 quarter. Because to me, that sounds ridiculously fast.
The fact that it happened in a quarter is probably the fact that there were a lot of good things happening which we were able to integrate and manifest very fast.
Got it.
It needs to be more sustainable, which is why I said,
Yeah, not a
Tata's-
knee jerk.
Yeah. A turnaround needs to find its feet in terms of the foundation also, so
Yeah.
that it's sustainable.
Not like spurts of extraordinary work and then you go back to where you were.
Yeah.
So, which is why systems.
But at the end of the year, we did show 15% growth in terms of the business. We had fewer people, and the profitability increased proportionately.
Got it. But when you talk about systems, I've heard you talk about systems in general, even in our conversations previously. One of the learnings I got from Amazon and my time there was that your work, your output should be primarily standardized and driven by systems, as you said, so that there is room for creativity on top of that consistency. So I'll give you a very small example. One of my team members ended up putting a product on sale on Prime Day, which is a big event for Amazon in the US especially, for the wrong price. And they put the decimal in the wrong place. So he was selling it for peanuts. And we suddenly saw at the end of the day that sales had rocketed for that product. Obviously, everyone's talking this, probably for resale on our platform. And so there was this post-mortem exercise, and we need to write a whole some document of exception. They call it the COE, I forget. But our VP gave feedback on this, and that was one of the learnings that stuck with me, and it'll be with me for a while. He said he didn't talk about the individual who made that mistake for a second. He said, how did our systems allow this to happen? And can we do a deep dive on that? So he made the whole problem about the system, not about the individual, their manager, and who went wrong, and the typical things that, at least coming from a family business, that we would deep dive. And that made me think, he didn't even care who made this mistake. And then they went ahead and changed the systems in a way that, hey, if there's a spike in sales that's unreasonable, why isn't there a flag that's raised, or why isn't there a sim that gets automatically raised to the team, and we start the deep dive early on before we lose a lot more money? And why isn't there a price limit, that a deviation limit on the price you put, so on and so forth? So my question to you being, I don't believe necessarily that we live in a corporate culture in India where systems are really valued. It's very jugaad driven, get things done sort of a mindset. And I understand that we are a hustling economy. We want to move fast and, genuinely make progress before spending too much time on brainstorming. How do you change that culture to moving towards systems? And how do you show people that though it will slow you down in the shorter run, it's valuable? I know that's a big monologue, but I'm curious about it.
So essentially, going back in time, we were one of the first companies to adapt uh, ERP and CRM,
Mm-hmm.
which automatically makes you disciplined
Yeah.
because the system won't accept any junk.
Yeah.
And unless you give the right inputs, it's not going to allow you to proceed ahead. So I think one was this, that we created a compulsion. And thanks to the leaders in the company who thought that way at that time, so many years ago,
Very
and made the
progressive.
right investments. And then, of course, it's a question of how you use the system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, in cricket, you have a batsman who's going to use power and the ball's not going to go very far.
Yeah.
And the next guy comes in and uses technique and
Timing.
it races to the boundary.
Yeah.
Much less effort and far greater impact.
Right.
So I think even in business, you've got to use technique. Use the science that's there. So let me give you an example. So,
Mm-hmm.
when I became director of sales, the first thing on my mind was, so I've got to produce these numbers every quarter. It's a public limited company. And if I want to remain in that job, I better figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
So we had the right ERP, CRM system. And so I used to call it the mentor system, which is that, ultimately, if you need to produce a certain sale, which is an outcome, you need to have enough funnel.
Right.
So what's the relationship between funnel and the outcome, which is the sales? So we were able to establish it. We were able to establish how much of funnel you needed, how much of vetted funnel you needed to be able to produce the sale at the end of the quarter.
Yeah.
And it started working. When we tested it multiple quarters, it was working. Then we figured out that therefore at every sales guy's level, you need to have adequate funnel.
Mm-hmm.
So the mentor system at the beginning of the quarter would tell the sales guy that you need so much of funnel, you're short of so much of funnel, as you're not going to make your quarter's number. And then if you didn't build up the funnel, the system would keep on sending reminders automatically. And then if the case, for instance, there are large cases and you want to monitor every stage of the case, the system's doing it for you. So if it doesn't move from stage 1 to stage 2,
Right.
it would remind the guy. If he didn't do it, it would alert his boss. So, even for the guys who were supervising sales teams, their job became easier because they knew exactly where things were going wrong.
Yeah.
So, in sum, we used to call it the mentor system, and the sales guys used to call it the tormentor system.
It's very tricky and very intrusive, but I think it's like giving cues to your team that, hey, you know what, there's a problem coming up. Why don't you solve it today? I almost feel like this is a professional therapy session for me, because one of the first things Suraj will remind us, like we try to do, was put our business on a CRM, and adoption and how people adapt to it and how they resist change it's a different ball game altogether. But in the interest of time, I wanted to quickly switch gears to your tryst with technology. You've brought it up in this conversation as well, but you moved on to Cisco after this. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Last 5
obviously,
last 5 years of my career were at Cisco.
yeah. So digitization for APJC is again not a walk in the park, and it seems very generic. So tell us what it entails, what it means to digitize a country. Walk us through maybe an initiative that you can deep dive into. I remember you once told me about agriculture being an interesting project for you, and also the fact that you were a non-techie. So how did this come about? How did you adapt to such a big responsibility that involved something that you didn't understand fully at the time? And then what was the impact of the work there?
First of all, it was a fascinating job, probably one of the best that I did in my career, because you have to actually create end-to-end solutions.
Mm-hmm.
So while one part of, or the larger part of Cisco is selling all the solutions to various customers across the globe, this part of the business, we were not constrained by who you bought from or who's contributing to the solution. We were like entrepreneurs. We were given a bunch of money, and we had to make sure that if we use Cisco resources, we would pay for it. Or if you needed to get a consultant in the picture, no problem, we had to pay for it.
So free hand.
We had given a free hand to create an end-to-end solution. End-to-end solution means you have to show an outcome as well, right, for the customer.
Of course.
So that made the whole game very different, and every country is different. Like even if you take, when I was looking at Asia Pacific, I presumed that whatever worked in India would work in Indonesia, which is our next stop, and it did, because countries are different
course,
and
yeah.
the context is different, and you've got to figure out solutions that work in each country. But putting together those blocks was very, very interesting. And so let me give you a few examples of the type of projects we took on. So let me first talk about that agriculture project.
True.
So we're working with the government of Kerala, and they said focus on paddy, rice, and prawn culture. And the idea was to support farmers to show that farming is viable. So so we took an area which is near Cannanore.
So this wasn't being farmed at the time.
There were farms there, but we were trying to optimize what was going on in those farms.
Okay.
So we chose a particular area which happened to be the constituency of the chief minister, which is Cannanore.
Mhm.
And we worked with farmers on the ground. We used sensors in the paddy fields to be able to figure out, the characteristics of the water and the prawn culture, the characteristics in the field and in the water. We would transmit that to what is called a village knowledge center. The village knowledge center was connected to an engineering college, which did the analysis, and all the information was farmed out to farmers in 15 panchayats. And then we enabled a website which gave them information in the local language, which told them when to take various actions at the appropriate times. It combined it with the weather information. It gave them access to information about procurement. Like, for instance, for a kg of prawn, you need 1.5 kg of input feed. So get it at the best prices. And monitor, make sure that they're able to show output at the appropriate levels, at the least cost, and most efficiently at the right time. So we finally did that project very successfully, and we got EY to do a report for us, which we were able to show the state government that therefore farming is viable if you go about it scientifically and in this manner.
So this is without subsidies viability.
Cisco funded the whole exercise, working closely with the government.
No, I meant like farming is viable without subsidies. Is that the...
No, that's a separate issue.
Okay.
I'm saying there may be subsidies, and that's fine. Maybe it's necessary. But irrespective, it's possible to do everything far more efficiently than it's being done now.
Got it.
And then we had a number of state governments look at that project and say, we want to do the same.
So you figured out the root cause of the problem by using these sensors. That's the data that you have access to that you were not aggregating earlier, or the farmers were not able to aggregate. You put in place a supply chain.
Yep.
Essentially for the equipment, collecting the data, analyzing the data.
Training the farmers in their local language.
Of course, because they have to be receptive or understand this information.
So it's the whole ecosystem. It's not just the supply chain. Understanding the whole ecosystem, understanding who to work with. The partner could be a supplier. It could be an engineering college. It is the government. It is the farmer. So the whole.
And how do you
chain
measure
process.
success for such a project?
Because we were able to show in financial terms that farming done this way is viable. Like, for instance, 1 kg of rice needs 3,000 or maybe 3,500 liters of water.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to make a difference there, be more economic in its usage without compromising on the output can make a big difference, not just to the farmer, but to the state, to the country, to the world.
Got it. So this optimization came from all ends. What inputs to give to cultivate better, how to reduce costs. Were you also focusing on how to improve sales, or was this just to do with?
So the first thing is you involve the experts because they know the subject better than you do.
Yeah.
So involve the right experts.
Got it.
And in terms of business, if you do a good job, like I said, there were multiple governments in this country and outside who wanted to replicate it. And we were the only people who knew how to do it end to end. So there is a return in it for us as well.
And obviously this was uncharted territory. So
Yeah.
you all put in the effort to get there.
So you're helping to digitize the whole country.
Mhm.
That's the larger purpose. You're developing an expertise which others don't have. And you're creating an end-to-end solution which actually can show outcomes, so it's not disputable.
Give me another example that we can walk through.
There's one example in India, pensions.
Mhm.
There's one of the state governments was struggling with pensions.
Mhm.
People were out on the street because they didn't get their pension on time, and old people. So
Right.
there was a uproar in society because of that. So the government essentially wanted that people should get their pensions in time so that there is no uproar on the streets.
Mhm.
So when we went deeper into it, we found that a lot of the people who had passed away, because it's a 1-year cycle
Right.
before they give proof of life.
Yeah.
So a lot of people pass away in between, and obviously there is corruption as well. And so the state government was spending a lot of money, but it wasn't going to the right recipients.
Mhm.
So the important thing was to do the proof of life in a shorter duration. So we put a black box in place. The biggest problem was people had to travel long distances. Old
Yeah.
people had to walk long distances. And then they had to affix their signature on a paper. And the signature itself would change because of their own abilities. Their physical
Oh,
ability is
wow.
diminishing. So the signature would also change. So matching and all that became a big problem, and there was a big outage. So we created a black box which would recognize the voice and which would throw out any recordings. It would reject any impersonation, which is mimicking somebody else's voice, or recordings. And then we put a system in place where the person would get a call and they would have to respond. They would have to read out something that was sent to them. And the machine would recognize whether it was actually that person or not. So within a few minutes, every month, proof of life was obtained, and it was being obtained 12 times a year instead of once. So as a result, first of all, people who were not living didn't get pensions.
Right.
And people who were living started getting their pensions in time.
Faster.
Because proof of life was available, the whole process was smoothened, and there was no unrest on the streets because of that. Solved the
Yeah.
problem, and it saved the government at least 1,000 crores.
Wow. Talk about impact and then doing good in society. I think it's a great example in how you can do business for good as well. So I want to quickly switch gears to your lifelong learning attitude. And I know even after retirement, you constantly keep writing about new technologies, especially AI seems to be your favorite.
So when you talk about learning, one's got to keep an open mind. Otherwise, you will age faster than you need to. And, you'll become more irrelevant faster than you need to. So I guess those inputs have to happen. I guess just to understand what's going on around you, you have to have an open mind. You have to read up.
Right.
You have to be sensitive to things that are happening. You have to be sensitive to technologies which are changing so fast and making such a huge determination of where we're going.
And how do you break down that learning process then?
So the interest can spark from anywhere. It can be a conversation.
Got it.
It
Got
can be
it.
an item in the newspaper. It can be something you see on
So
TV.
an open mind, it comes back to that
Correct.
that same piece.
So I think that curiosity is important, that you have to keep curiosity alive. And then there'll be certain subjects which you want to do a deep dive on,
Right.
something you feel you could write about in more detail,
Uh-huh.
and write it in an interesting way so that people would want to read it. It's not
Of
just
course.
a agglomeration of facts.
Yeah. I know one of the interests that you or that you were one of the things that you were curious about was AI. You still continue to be very passionate about it. So let's touch on that real quick. So how do you see this technology and its impact on society and at various economic stratas in society?
So first of all, it's a very interesting subject, a very intriguing subject,
Yeah.
and I think people are trying to grapple with it, understand it, and it'll take a long time before we do. But one thing is for certain, that if we use it to augment what we are doing, and if that's the purpose of artificial intelligence, it's all good to go. But if we don't understand the ramifications of it, and don't have the ability to control it in some manner as appropriate, because sometimes when you say control, it means curbing growth, curbing innovation, and so on and so forth. If you don't do that, we don't know the end game. Okay, we really don't know where it will go.
Yeah.
So everybody is speculating. So one of the interesting aspects about artificial intelligence is the fact that there's no ethical framework.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, like for instance, there was this car that crashed into a tree.
Yeah.
And there was nobody in the driver's seat because it was an automated vehicle. There was somebody in the next seat and the seat behind. And it took 38 hours for the fire to die down because of the batteries. And but the more important question was, therefore, who's responsible for it? And who's culpable for that accident? What happens what would have happened if it had hit people? Or a child.
Yeah.
Where's the culpability? So I think there's no ethical framework there, because the machine doesn't know right from wrong. And strangely, I was reading that the Vienna University of Technology is now going back to the Vedas to explore the rules around what should be done,
Morality
and what should be prohibited. And they're falling back on the Mimamsa, which is the ancient texts based on the Vedas, to be able to try and put a framework around it.
Yeah, because what do you feed in? What do you, like, someone needs to guide the system at first to distinguish right from wrong. And I've also heard people take a very specific viewpoint for that incident, for example, that accident, versus taking a totalitarian viewpoint and saying, okay, the overall accidents are going down with AI. So I think as society, as this technology evolves and we wrap our head around it, our sense of right or wrong will change, and our trust in the technology will hopefully increase. But also what's important is what we feed this technology. Is it biased? If it's biased at the root, I think.
And sometimes it can get very creative. Like, in the US, there was this case. There was this guy who was sitting in a Colombian airline, and those one of those trolleys came and hit him on his knee. And so he filed a case against that particular airline. I think it was Ariane Airways or something.
Okay.
The lawyer who submitted the papers for the case quoted multiple case laws. And when it went up before the judge, it turned out that all of them were fictitious. And then when they went back to the lawyer, he said, I used a generative AI engine.
It's generating cases.
It was all hallucination.
Oh, wow. This is crazy.
So you have multiple cases like that also happening, where you don't know how much to trust that.
But in terms of impact, then coming back to my question, like, do you think this will disproportionately impact the poor, their livelihoods? Because they'll be the least adaptive, or they won't even understand its ramifications. By the time they do, maybe it's too late, because this world is changing faster for even the informed. So how do you see that? And
So the biggest problem continues to be the digital divide, right?
uh,
40% of the world is still not connected.
right,
And so therefore, you're going to be deprived of education. You're going to be deprived of market access
yeah,
and all the rest. So I think this issue will certainly impact people who are not connected. That's right now it's 40% of the world.
wow,
So I think that's the first issue that we have to tackle. Second is that it's going to transform all the jobs. So it's going to affect every single industry that you can think of in multiple ways. Jobs are going to change. So the need for reskilling and upskilling is going to be very, very high.
I know I haven't told you anything about it, but I want to put you on the spot here with decades of experience solving problems, turning around companies, and your tryst with technology as well. If Anil Nair were to start a venture today and you had to spot a problem to solve for the Indian consumer or for India as a whole, what would that problem be? How would you think about it, and what solution would you propose for it? So you can take a few minutes.
No, it'll take a few hours to be able to think about such a deep question.
They don't give us so much time in the MBA with case studies and consulting and all of that. But let's pick something in the technology space or education.
It doesn't spring to mind immediately, but I'm sure there are lots of solutions that need deep thought to be able to put in place. But clearly, it has to be digital. It has to be, technology, aided by technology to be able to get there.
Got it. So let's probably brainstorm together on this. So what they typically do for us in the consulting world is they'll give us the perspective of a CEO of a company. So maybe now that I know someone in the audience is interested in understanding how education will shape up in India. So if we were to think about revolutionizing education, is there something that springs to mind, a particular aspect that you think needs attention in India?
So I think we need to also look at, the spaces that are not covered in India. For instance, we're a million teachers short.
Right.
We're at least 500,000 doctors short in the country, considering the population and the way it's growing. So the first thing that we need to do is plug these large gaps, and it probably has to do with supplementing what we already have. For
Right.
instance, if it's doctors, obviously you're not going to be able to produce them through distance education. But
You'll produce a lot more patients, but yeah.
But how can you supplement what you already have with digital infrastructure to be able to resolve the problem? So I think there are lots of focused areas.
So if you were the Cisco MD of digitization again, and let's say we gave you this problem of closing this gap of having doctors, you had to build a team and pursue this problem statement. Give us a 2-minute sneak peek into how Anil Nair thinks about a problem and says, okay, first I'll put this in place and this is how I'll evaluate the opportunity and break the problem down.
There was a company in healthcare which started doing an Airbnb type of operation with the operation theaters. Okay, so what they did was they found that most of the operation theaters with very expensive equipment. Okay, but they were not being used for many hours in the day.
Yeah.
Or let's say they were unoccupied for many hours of the day.
Underutilization. Yeah.
So they figured out and they got them into a network.
Wow.
And they started contacting patients who needed, the smaller operations where they didn't have to stay overnight. And they started utilizing this additional capacity that was lying there unutilized, and they created a whole business out of it. But the lesson there is just like the the capacity that we have, and maybe we have so much of capacity even in medical schools. And so, how are we going to make use of that capacity to be able to produce more doctors?
Yeah, that's a great point and a great story as well. Now I feel like we'll have something for human parts unutilized as well. Like, hey, this is an unutilized brain. Please, do you want to outsource it for a bit? But no, it's been a lovely conversation. I know we've taken a greater part of your morning, and I feel that there are at least 10 to 15 aspects of this conversations that I want to deep dive on in our future interactions. But in the end, I'll ask my audience to not like, not subscribe, not share this. But if you listen to this, hopefully this changes your life in some way. And of course, you have a great mentor in Anil. So feel free to spam him with your requests. But thank you so much for your time. I really
Thank you very
appreciate
much. Pleasure.